All right, I think we can get started. I see some people are still coming in, but they'll join us as I do the introduction. So, the good day, everybody, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the first of our spring seminar speaker series on perspectives in global development. Our speaker today, Ariana Constant, is going to be talking about community approach to strengthening smallholders, farmers' positions, power, and contribution within agricultural value chains. I'll say a few words about our speaker, but most of the detail you already have, and I really want to make sure that we give her all the time she has to share her, with us ideas. But Ariana Constant, is a director of the Clinton Global Initiative, an initiative of Clinton Foundation that drives community agricultural business development across farming populations in Malawi, Rwanda, and Tanzania. She works between New York and Africa to create partnerships and networks with governments, private sector, not-for-profits, and civil society. You'll hear much more about her work in a talk, so I'll not exhaust all her accomplishments here. But I can tell you that personally, I had the privilege to work closely with her in 2019 and 2020 when I was at the African Development Bank. And I can tell you that there's very few people with as much a passion and knowledge about developing community agricultural projects in developing countries as our speaker today. However, this comes as no surprise because she's really built on a solid foundations that you require in this particular field. Between 2009 and 2012, she was served in the Peace Corps as an agroforestry extension agent in Senegal. And she holds a BSc degree in natural resource policy and management and a master's degree in international agriculture and rural development from here at Cornell University. So she's really indeed one of her own, and she's gone out there in the world and making a difference. So Ariana, we welcome you back to Cornell. We wish you were here on campus in person, but we look forward to hearing your remarks. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ed. It's so great to be virtually back with all of you Cornellians. Yeah, I wish I was there in person as well on campus. That would have been fantastic. And thank you so much, Ed and Terry and Louise for inviting me to share some of my perspectives and a little bit about a lot of work that we're doing over at the Clinton Foundation with the CDI team. So I'll quickly get started as we don't have too much time today, and we'll save Q&A, I think, as Ed told me, for the end of the presentation. So just a quick overview of some of the topics that I'll be chatting about today. I'll give you an overview of the Clinton Development Initiative, who we are and what we do, the community agribusiness approach, which is the main way that we kind of engage in Africa. I'll give a couple of partnership case studies about three key focus areas that we are engaged in, talk about our theory of change, give examples of what this strengthened farmer producing communities that I talked about in the title looks like, and then a bit more about sustainability and what I mean when I talk about the sustainability of our work at CDI. So for those of you that are maybe less familiar with some of the topics that I'll be talking about today, I wanted to make sure to give a couple of key points of reference for all of you. Basically, 60% of the population of sub-Saharan Africa is smallholder farmers, and 23% of sub-Saharan Africa's GDP comes from agriculture. That GDP growth originating in agriculture is about 4 times more effective in reducing poverty than GDP growth in other sectors, and both of that comes from the World Bank. Also, more than half of the extreme poor live in sub-Saharan Africa. About 413 million people living on less than $2 a day. And about half of those people are also undernourished. And then lastly, you can see the graph on the right from the FAO is about yield growth and basically references that cereals on sub-Saharan Africa have had very little yield growth over the last 60 years. And I think it's important to point out that this is really critical for us in our work as we're looking at that yield gap as a main way to help farmers increase their incomes and revenue streams through agriculture. And the yield gap is really just the difference between what farmers or producers are actually producing in terms of metric tons or kilos from their agricultural activities and what the potential of that crop is to yield at. So because of factors like poor quality soil or low quality seeds, you see often a big gap between what people are actually getting and what the potential of that crop is to get in terms of yield. Now, over to CDI, which is the team that I work on. The Clinton Development Initiative is one of 7 initiatives at the Clinton Foundation. We're a registered 501c3 out of the US. And as Ed mentioned, our main focus is to create economic opportunities for farming communities, strengthen community groups, focus on income generation and the reliability of that income generation. We operate regionally in Eastern and Southern Africa. You can see on this little map over here, we're in Rwanda, Tanzania, and Malawi. We have offices in Kigali in Rwanda, in Iringa in Tanzania, and in Lilongwe in Malawi. In Rwanda, we're working in the Eastern province in all 7 districts. Tanzania, we're in 3 districts in Iringa. And then in Malawi, we're in 10 districts in the central region. We have memorandums of understanding with each of the governments of those countries. And essentially we were invited, President Clinton actually was invited by the governments at the time that we started working in those countries over a decade ago to come in and really focus on working in this sector. We focus intently on agriculture, but more specifically on agribusiness opportunities with the communities we work with. And those communities make up about 70,000 active farmers right now. Our biggest cohort, I guess you could say, of farmers is in Malawi. We have about 35,000 farmers that we're actively working with there. And the rest of the farmers are split between Rwanda and Tanzania. And we really think of ourselves as business advisors and less so as traditional nonprofit implementers. We're there to help advise farming communities who then are able to make kind of their own informed decisions based on the information that we share with them. CDI focuses on tackling a lot of complex challenges with our farming community partners and other partners as well. Over the last decade, we've evolved a couple of times. As I mentioned, we were invited to work in these countries about a decade ago with a focus on food security and on climate resilience across farmer populations. Again, our memorandums of understandings were with the ministries of agriculture in those countries. And really kind of reinforced our collaboration and the support of the government initiatives and their priorities in the agriculture sector focused on smallholder farmers. We've worked also a bit in the private sector as well, so bring a lot of experience from that too. And then in about 2017, we decided to take a step back from the work that we had engaged in and kind of re-enter the space that we work in, the nonprofit space. To focus a bit more intently on farmers, their income, and the reliability of their income through the agriculture sector. Basically, taking a step back involved us doing a couple more literary reviews of kind of some of the key challenges that we saw in the space, speaking with our teams. So we've got a Malawian team in Malawi, Rwanda, and Tanzania, talk with them about their personal experiences with our organization and outside the organization. And get contribution and feedback on what they thought was working and was not working. And then also, as I've mentioned, farming communities are a key partner of ours, discussing with the farming communities exactly where they saw pain points in a lot of the key topics that we had focused on in the past. And what came out of that was a focus on income and enough food for people to feed themselves and their families. And so we wanted to make sure to kind of reshape our program based around this feedback, and research and take an approach, what we identify now as a multi-pronged approach to identifying and addressing the challenges that came out of these discussions. And some of the key challenges and discussion points or assumptions that we make and we operate under at CDI are that climate change is impacting absolutely everything in this sector: water availability, rains, drought, heat, pests, diseases. Soil quality is suboptimal in many of the places that we're working. Soils are often very acidic or maybe even nitrogen deficient, which impact the ability for crops to grow and yield well. Farmers traditionally work as individuals. Access to quality seeds, finance, markets, information is generally pretty variable. And the ability for farmers to turn agricultural activities into reliable business and profitable business is very difficult. And so we recognize, where we are able to add value in this space, where the farmers are coming from, but also understand the perspectives of many different other stakeholders. I mentioned the close relationship with the governments, but also with many different actors in the private sector. And that is kind of what helps us have the impact that we have in the communities that we're working in. Now, CDI, again, focuses on this community approach, which is what we call CAB, to help strengthen, as my title clearly explains, farmers' position, power, and contribution in the agricultural economy in the countries that we're currently working with. Now, important to kind of lay out for everyone how we actually get this done. We do this in 3 key ways, which you see listed on the slide here. Group formation is the first critical way that we get this work done, essentially recognizing, as I mentioned, that farmers are typically working as individuals and that there is power in groups. So we essentially start with forming smaller informal groups between 15 and 35 members each, and work them up towards officially, hopefully, becoming registered as a cooperative or a business if that's what their hopes are. And we also work with a couple of VSLA, Village Savings and Loans groups as well. But group formation is the key kind of entry point, and group journeys from informal to formal is a key part of our work. We also focus and get work done through training. We have a lot of in-house expertise and experience on our team. And we work to help respond to farmers' expressed needs and desires for different and new trainings that can range all the way from traditional agronomy trainings, planting densities and spacings, and climate smart agriculture, all the way through to kind of group dynamics and management, leadership skills, entrepreneurship, brokerage, negotiation, and topics like that. We also help broker key relationships between the community groups that we're forming and other stakeholders. So you'll hear me talk a lot about sustainability today. This is a key part of that. We want to make sure that there's less silos that exist between the farming communities and the other stakeholders or actors in the agricultural supply chains or value chains. And so part of our work is building the relationship between the farming communities and all of these other stakeholders, which again, I'll talk to you all about in the partnership slides. We also work across a couple key thematic areas, which include production, marketing, and finance, all very intrinsically linked together. The production is really important for us because if farmers are unable to produce enough to feed themselves and their families and have a little bit of extra left over, they don't really have the base to be resilient to shocks, and then they can't take on potentially expanding into different revenue streams or expanding the amount of land they're planting under. And that's often difficult for them. And so production is a very key part. We want to make sure that farmers are able to produce to their potential, the crops that they want to grow, and that they're connected to markets. Within marketing is another key one. So basically figuring out how do we play matchmaker between the farming groups or producers that we're working with and the markets that are out there and looking for raw commodities, typically with the work that we do to date. And so key to understand kind of the marketing aspects, not only locally, but regionally and internationally, and what are the challenges in those spaces, and then also finance. Basically, if farmers don't have access to finance, a lot of this work breaks down. And so we need to figure out how to unlock or overcome some of the challenges we see in that space. This is not an exhaustive list of the thematic work that we do. I think, you heard we talk about climate change. We do a lot of work around gender equity and inclusion as well. We set a floor of 40% women that need to be a part of all of the groups, and also 40% women in leadership of all the groups that we work with. And then we also do a lot around the promotion of youth, but again, not an exhaustive list of the thematic work that we're engaged in. A little bit of a closer look at what the journey of an individual farmer looks like with the Clinton Development Initiative. And this assumes that we're going into a community that's never worked with us before. And so there are individual farmers working on their own, and essentially what it would look like for them to travel through the program with us. So you see the part on the left talks about joining a group and forming a group. The group then becomes part of this Clinton Development Initiative ecosystem, where they receive things like training. You can see a list of trainings on the slide here. Improved access to quality inputs, financing, aggregation, you can see again there, and then small business incubation. So, talking to them about how they grow the businesses that maybe they're currently engaged in, or potential new businesses. And at the end of this, we see no more than 5 years. These groups are able to be fully integrated, or well on their way to being fully integrated into the agricultural economy and some of the supply chains that they work within. Now, as I mentioned, partnerships are a key driver of our work, and our most important partners are the farming communities that we work with. Some of you may have heard President Clinton talking about putting people first. This is near and dear to our hearts and something we think about every day. Farmers and farming communities need a seat at the table and a voice at the table. And that's what we're trying to facilitate. We're trying to build the relationships up between farming communities and other partners, and have them have an equitable stake in some of these discussions, and then build trust across these groups. 3 key partner areas that I'll talk about in a little bit are our technical partners, our marketing partners, and our financial partners. Again, not an exhaustive list, but to give you a good insight into kind of how we work with other organizations, in a way to ensure that our work is more sustainable than if we were to be doing this on our own. And often it gives us a much clearer exit strategy for getting out of being involved in the middle of some of this work between the farming communities and other stakeholders. And you see here on the slide a quote from one of our farmers in Malawi about knowledge and knowledge sharing, and that farming is one area where knowledge has power. And I think that was a really important thing to share, because it does, this is not unique to this farmer, and it's a sentiment that we hear a lot from our community partners that we work with across Malawi, Rwanda, and Tanzania. So I'll quickly move on to our first technical partner, our partnerships, focus on typically seeds, inputs, soil, and innovation. And you can see, again, this blurb I have on the left of the screen here, from the Access to Seed Index. Seed industry has a vital role to play in helping farmers adapt to climatic changes while simultaneously raising production levels, but that only 23% of smallholders in the member communities of COMESA have access to these improved varieties of seeds. And so there's lots of challenges, and that doesn't just apply to seeds, that applies to inputs in many cases as well, but lots of challenges in this space for smallholder farmers. The first of which you can see is lack of access. So most seeds are produced maybe at a central location in one of the countries, or at least in the countries that we're working in. And so access for farmers to those seeds is often difficult. It could be because of the proximity to that location, it's just too far of a distance, or the networks and the logistics to getting seeds from that central location out to the farmers in rural communities is often not there. So farmers just can't access those seeds. There's also an issue of costs, the very high costs of seeds. A lot of private seed companies who have the best quality seeds often put a high price on those seeds. And so farmers can't access it because they don't have enough money to pay for those seeds. There's also limited trials. So I can give an example of one of the countries that I've worked in, where basically there were 2 varieties of soybean for almost the entire time that I've been working with CDI, which is 7 years, that farmers were producing. And the yield potential of those varieties was extremely low. And we were seeing no innovation or trialing of new varieties in that space. So it's another key challenge that farmers are facing. And the last that I'll point out is timeliness. Seeds and inputs and planting activities across smallholder farming communities especially are dependent on rainfall. And so if the farmers are unable to get access to these seeds on time ahead of the season, it can have a massive impact on the yield potential and also the revenue potential of those farmers. And so what we look to collaborate with some of our technical partners on is trialing and IDing of varieties that are interesting to farmers. So making sure that farmers are engaged in early discussions around new varieties that are coming out, whether they're climate resilient or fortified or just a high quality seed. Farmers obviously have unique preferences on the size of the seeds or the grains and the color and a couple other key factors. And so it's really important to keep them involved in this work, as they will be the main user of those seeds. They'll be the ones planting those seeds. Also on demonstration plots, which is basically a scaling up. Once you have identified a variety that you want to plant with farmers at scale, you want to have a demo plot within the farmers' fields. And so we work with hub farmers in our network, which are farmer leaders, to have demonstration plots and field days, which is basically events around the demonstration plots, inviting key stakeholders in the agricultural supply chains to see and learn from that farmer, for the farmer to share with other farmers how this variety is producing, which then helps build the market case for that seed to become commercialized in the country or in the area. And then also knowledge sharing and feedback. And one of our key partners in this space is the CGIAR network. So you can see CIMMYT, Harvest Plus, and CIAT on the slide here. And I wrote down a couple of key stats about the work that we're doing with those partners. But essentially, we recognized a lot of synergies between our organizations. These groups were looking to commercialize and get as many of their varieties, which were typically climate resilient and fortified, or fortified, out to as many farmers as possible. And we had a network of, as I told you before, about 70,000 farmers. And so we figured out we could, we should team up and try to get some work done together. And so the text under that CGIAR network gives you a bit more clarity around what specifically we're doing with them, but a lot of demonstration plots and trialing with farmer communities on the varieties of seeds that CIMMYT, Harvest Plus, and CIAT had available. And so next is basically looking at how these, we work with the partners to complement our existing work, because CDI does have a lot of work in this space as well, to make that work more sustainable. And so one of the things I thought I'd give an example about in this space is that we work with farming communities to become certified seed producers and or resellers. And the greatest example of that is in Tanzania. We work with the Tanzania Official Seed Certifying Institute to certify and register 93 farmers to become seed certifiers and producers. And this is important because when you have individuals within rural communities that are certified and able to produce seed, it overcomes a lot of those access challenges and timeliness challenges that I mentioned in the first slide around this partnership. You can also see other examples about existing overlap in areas of work, increasing the adoption of improved seed. And so there's many different ways that we work with partners to make this work more sustainable and build up the capacity of the farming communities to get more involved in this work than they maybe had been in the past. I think because of time, I'll have to skip through this, but there are some perspectives here once this PowerPoint is shared with all of you from our partners. I often find that it's great to share perspectives from the partners about our work, not necessarily from us. And these basically go over how great it is to be in these partnerships and how we can reach more people through partnerships. And that's kind of what you'll see here. On to the financial partners. You can see here, I pulled some stats from the World Bank about enterprises, and basically it calls out 35% of enterprises in Malawi identified access to finance as a major constraint. And so generally, farmers face, again, many constraints when engaging with the sector: financial literacy, credit history, loan access, perceived risk and interest rates. I think one of the biggest challenges is on credit history, which I'll get to a bit about the work that we're doing within CDI to build the credit history of farmers. But it's important to recognize that it's kind of a multifaceted system that's impeding farmers' ability to be able to access and engage in the financial sector. And I put interest rates here as well, something that we don't often talk about, but is extremely relevant to farming communities. Interest rates and time-bound loan packages for farmers are often a big challenge. So interest rates are really high, which make it prohibitive for farmers to even, be able to engage in receiving a loan. And so that's really important there. you can see here that, in response to the challenge, we're trying to collaborate with banking partners specifically on addressing some of these issues that I called out. Financial literacy training and specifically direct engagement with farming communities from day one, day zero is really important. I have Standard Bank's logo up on the page here. They have been in discussion with us for many years and basically made a big effort to come with us to meet the farmers that were seeking loans from them, understand more about their production, the risk profile, some of the constraints, and get to know them better, and then also help with trainings on topics that they were less familiar with. And I think that really helped build up this relationship, the strong relationship that we see today, and is a good example for other banks or MFIs to follow in terms of just building the trust and the relationship between communities and banks. There's also a bit about credit history and savings culture. One of the limiting factors of farmers engaging in loans is a credit history. And so often banks will require 3 years of credit history. But if farmers can't access a loan in the first place, how can they ever build up 3 years of credit history? And so what I'll talk about in the next slide is that we have our own program of loaning to farmers that helps kind of replace and deal with this challenge that we see with the banks. And then you can see a couple other things that I already talked about. And as I mentioned, Standard Bank has worked with us to over the last couple of years, and with them we've helped 15 farmer cooperatives open bank accounts with no recurring fees, and it's impacted about 4,000 farmers and trained all of those cooperative leaders on financial management. And also they've been a part of a lot of discussions around innovative products for farmers. So typically when we talk about banks and loans to smallholder farmers, we're talking about input loans, so seeds and fertilizers. But what we see as the missing gap is that we need to talk about output or early grain purchase loans, so post-season activities. One of the biggest challenges with connecting farmers to markets is side selling, and I'll get to that in the market slides. But this output loan essentially addresses that because it overcomes the issue of farmers not being able to get paid on time as soon as they harvest their crops. Essentially, a loan is given to a cooperative leadership team who then are able to, with that money, buy all the commodities from their cooperative members and store them in the cooperative warehouse. Therefore, their members, are paid on time, and the cooperative leadership team is the one that can take on the risk of not getting maybe paid immediately, and then manage the relationship with the market directly. So it helps with a lot of different things to have a loan package similar to that. And then quickly through how we work with partners, I mentioned that we have our own loan portfolio, loan program. Since 2018, we've deployed more than $340,000 worth of inputs to farming communities across Malawi, Rwanda, and Tanzania, with the hopes that we are helping farmers, not the hopes, we are helping farmers build a soft credit history with verified repayment rates through our platform called Farm Force, which manages our data at the field level. And we're using that data that we have through this program to go to the banks and say, this should be able to be used in place of farmers having formally 3 years of credit history. And you can see a couple other pieces on the slide here, but I think that the most important last piece about the sustainability of the work is emphasizing the business potential. It is good business for the banks to figure out how to lend to farmers. It opens up millions of new customers, hundreds of millions of new customers for them. And so, this is in their best business interest to help solve these challenges with farmers connecting to banks. And so we keep also pushing that conversation as well. Again, a couple of perspectives from Standard Bank about the work that we do with them and the relationships, but we'll skip over that in the interest of time. Moving on to markets, important when I say markets to point out that it's not just local markets and informal markets, it's regional markets, it's international markets. So it's kind of all sorts of markets here. And you can see from an FAO report, I'll read the last sentence here, trade happens mainly through informal local marketing channels offering low prices. So this is a key challenge that we see with the market space. I listed a couple here: access to market information, low prices, working as individual farmers, knowledge of business and negotiation skills, and high logistic costs. Access to markets is a key one because, as you see here, the main trade happens through local markets who are offering low prices. So farmers don't often know about the prices that are being offered in more formal markets. And if they did, they might hold on to their crop and sell into that formal market. So we're trying to focus on this with our market partners. Also on low prices, there's a lack of recognition for the value of high quality crops that are being produced. So making sure that we deal with that. Working as individual farmers, the challenge here is that markets are not going to be able to source product from hundreds of thousands of individual smallholder farmers, but they could from 20 central aggregation and warehousing points throughout a community, and so, or throughout an area. And so we're trying to deal with that as well. You can see, so on the collaboration point, one of the key points we focus on is market requirements and quality. So making it clear to the farming communities the value in producing a high quality crop instead of just a general commodity. So making sure that the crops are uniform in size and they're cleaned of debris and rocks and things like that. And because they do that extra work at the end of the season, they're able to fetch a higher price for that quality. And you can see other couple of key points here. Our key market partner that I want to call out here is Africa Improved Foods, and they are a buyer in Rwanda. And we have a strong connection between our farmers in Malawi, so the 15 cooperatives that are producing high quality soybean, and this market in Rwanda. Not so close. It's obviously a market outside of Malawi that we went to, but you can see here that over $1 million has essentially been generated by smallholder farmers through this market relationship. So really pivotal for some of these communities who were struggling to find a good market for their soybeans in Malawi. And a bit more about the sustainability of the work. Relationships with these market partners and finding the right partners are really important. Africa Improved Foods came out and said in 2018 that they wanted to increase their sourcing and sustainable sourcing from smallholder farming communities and invest in building resilient supply chains. We took that as a key to quickly go and have conversation with them, figure out how can we be a part of what they want to see in terms of sustainable sourcing and sourcing from smallholder farmers, and didn't let the fact that most of our producers of soybean were in Malawi get in the way. So that's one. And also focus on ease of doing business, essentially understanding the constraints of the market partners in relation to kind of what's happening at the community level. So I mentioned that typically farmers are growing crops on their own. They're producing a small amount of product that is not attractive to a larger, more formal buyer. And so figuring out how do we solve for the challenges the market see in trying to do what they want to do, and the challenges that exist in the farming communities to make sure that we sync up there. We also, in terms of sustainability, are looking to help build in work and relationships around contracts as well, because contracts are more reliable and dependable, and also can enable farming communities to go to banks and maybe secure loans. And then also looking at diversifying revenue streams. So not just focusing on one crop, we've got to make sure that this work, if it's going to be sustainable, if the farmers are going to be sustainable and participate in these value chains, need to have a couple different revenue streams coming in. And so we start with soybean in many cases, and we build off of that as a solid foundation for farmers to then grow and diversify into other opportunities like you see listed here. Fish farming, aquaculture, or poultry. We also do a lot of work in many other commodity supply chains, a couple of tree crop projects, etc. So good to kind of go through that. And then here are some thoughts from our market partners. We've got Ruth here from Malawi talking about the importance of belonging to a group and aggregating. And then we've got Prosper, who's the country manager from Africa Improved Foods in Rwanda, talking about how it has been for decades such a dilemma to be able to integrate smallholder farmers into their supply chains and business models, and that we're trying to solve for that now, and how great it's been to be able to do that. I think I'm going to try to play this. Maybe not. Oh, there it goes. A quick video from one of our farmers in Malawi, Agnes Moses, who highlights partnerships, group formation work, and the power of working together, and then also some of the market access information and empowerment issues that I've been discussing a bit. So a break from listening to me. Can you guys hear? Oh,
yes, we hear it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ed.
agribusiness ndi kagulu kalimi kamene kamayika mbewu zawo pamodzi ndi kumapanga business yawo osati pa munthu umodzi koma pa gulu. Ndipo ife ankomera takwanitsako kusonkha soya ndi kukagulitsa kulilongwe ku kampani yotchedwa AIF, African Improved Foods. Ndipo mavuto amene takhala tikumana nawo mkatikatimu ndi mavuto ochulukirapo ndithu. Maka vuto limeneli la nsika zaka zapitazo tinali nalo, koma apapa azilangiziwo anakwanitsa kutipezera monga ndafotokoza kale kuti takagulitsako kulilongwe kumene alimi aona kuti kukhala pagulu ndi phindu. Maphunziro amenewa anatikozera ife ndi abungwe la Clinton amene tikugwira nawo ntchito. Anauza a Ministry of Trade kuti pali gulu la anthu alimi amene akufunikira upangiri kuti apindule pa ulimi wawo kapena pa business yawo ya ulimi. Anayitiranisira ife motsogozedwa ndi alangizi athu amayi nkhoma kuti bungwe limene malipetsa maphunziro ndi la Ministry of Trade.
Oh. Not sure what happened there, but we'll keep moving.
Okay.
Just know that we don't have too much time. So
yeah.
Anyways, as you can hear from Agnes, it's, I think, better to hear from, again, some of our farmers and community partners themselves about the kind of the impact of some of the work and the efforts that we're doing in terms of the group formation and support on that, and also the brokerage of relationships between them and the markets and financial actors. I wanted to then shift gears a little bit to talk about a recent evaluation we had done by Wageningen University and Research. Essentially, it was an evaluation of our community agribusiness approach, which is, you can see here outlined in our theory of change, a bit more about the activities, outputs, outcomes, and impact of the work that we're doing. And you know, the reason that we wanted to do this, and some of the answers that were, or sorry, the questions that were asked are kind of, you know, how has CDI implemented this approach? Does the approach address farmer identified barriers? What are the roles of partnerships, major bottlenecks the program should still address? And so we learned a lot through this evaluation and thought it was a really important part of our work and a next step in making sure that we were fine tuning and kind of hitting on the impact channels as we should be and as we thought we were. And so got a lot of feedback from farming communities and other stakeholders, which kind of confirmed that soybean production through our training is increasing. Farmers are receiving better prices through the work that we're doing, and a couple other key points. They also highlighted, which I thought was great, on the improved prices piece, that farmers were receiving a 26% higher price in Malawi for selling to AIF as opposed to selling within the markets in Malawi. And so it really does emphasize the importance of looking at those regional market opportunities for farming communities to make sure that they're able to make income and have that income be reliable. They also identified a couple of key areas that we should continue to focus on, which I thought was great to hear from them, because it's what we had also thought we should continue to work on. And this is on diversifying farmers' revenue streams. So making sure that, you know, building off of the success of what we've seen with soybean in Malawi, what else are we doing to connect farmers to other market opportunities? So markets are really our main driver. And so how do we identify more opportunities for farmers to then plug into and diversify the revenue streams a bit? And the other one was working on continuing to build the sustainable relationships between farmers and other stakeholders, which I'll get to in my slide in a bit about sustainability. Now, wanted to go back to the title of the presentation. I know I'm short on time, Ed, so I'm going to quickly wrap it up. But so what does the strength of position look like for farming communities in Rwanda? And basically just want to highlight quickly kind of where the communities are today because of some of the work that we've done. This cooperative in Kayonza in the Eastern Province in Rwanda has been able to buy health insurance for its members, which is great, as they say, and we often say, you know, healthy farmers are productive farmers. People need to be able to engage in this work to be able to get the yields and make the revenue that they need to. So that's fantastic that we heard about that. They also started their own agribusiness shop. So they're selling things like seeds and wheelbarrows, which helps with the access to some of those things at the community level, and started building up a credit history through this loan portfolio, or this loan that we gave to them, for maize production. And you see in the stat here, they're producing a lot of maize, 3 metric tons a hectare, which is great for Rwanda. Often we're seeing about 1 metric ton to 2 metric tons of hectare under rain-fed conditions. So great success for that group there. In Tanzania, we're working with a couple of community banks. We're actually working with 61, and one of them have faced a lot of challenges with office space and not having access to quality inputs. And so we worked with them and connected them to an input loan focused on yellow beans. And since then, they've been able to double their share value, increase savings by 33%, and plan to become a cooperative that's focused only on yellow bean production. They want to become kind of the yellow bean producers in the Iringa region in Tanzania, which is great that they're carving out that market for themselves. And then in Malawi, this is where we've been working on community agribusiness for the longest time. We've helped registered 15 cooperatives, as I mentioned. You can see 886,000 in sales this past season, but over 1 million to date into those farmers' pockets through this work. And today, which is a great accomplishment, is we're seeing that they're linked with the Ministry of Trade to AgCom, who's funded by World Bank. And essentially what we're helping them with is connecting them to this finance source to build warehouses. So as these farmers are growing their cooperatives, they need formal warehousing spaces. And we're able to connect them directly to this funder without our involvement, besides playing that facilitator role. So it was really great to see that. And last slide, I know we're really close here. I wanted to talk about sustainability. You'll see at the top a quote about sustainability in nonprofits that really resonates with me. And basically, I wanted to address some of the key challenges we see to achieving sustainability. So how do we solve challenges that we see in the farming sector across agricultural communities, across different actors in the value chains, without creating dependencies on people like us? And this is the kind of crux of a lot of our work. And so we're focusing on sustainability vis-a-vis working ourselves out of a job, which is another thing that you'll hear many colleagues of the Clinton Foundation talk about, which is essentially an exit strategy. So things that we look at and talk about a lot is, how is our funding being used? Are we putting it towards a system or a program or intervention that creates a dependency on us and keeps us in the middle of that relationship? Or is it building the pipeline for others to maybe take over and for us not to directly be involved in it? And so there's lots of discussion here around flexible funding versus and unrestricted funding versus restricted funding from donors. And so something important to kind of think about and leave you all with. Other things we're thinking about is certification and compliance standards for farming communities. So if we were to leave today, what would be left behind? And one of the things that we thought is important is we work with these cooperatives to be able to produce high quality products in large quantities consistently under climate smart conditions with equitable participation of women and many other key criteria. Could these groups be registered or certified as like a Rainforest Alliance or something like that, to be able to have them better recognized by the marketplace as a reliable producer group? And so that's something we're also exploring. We're also constantly trying to make the business case to a lot of the private sector actors for investing in this work, and that it's good business for them to be investing into smallholder farmers and the development of smallholder farmer supply chains. And that could be in anything from infrastructure, roads and warehousing. There's lots of opportunities to invest in technology, irrigation, et cetera. So that's really important part of our work. Digitalization with COVID, obviously this has come forefront for us. And so it's another thing that we're thinking about as well. And I will literally stop there because I can see Ed's face. And we can just switch on to questions, or, talking about some of the questions I posed in the slide, or questions from any of you that you have on what I presented today. I know it's so much information, but thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Ariana. We have time for just a couple of questions. So I see some hands are up already. If you can raise either your virtual or real hand, and maybe you can stop the slide so we can see everybody's face. So I'm going to start with Manoj.
Yeah.
Well, if you can make your question as brief and precise as possible.
Sure. Ariana, thanks so much. It was a nice presentation. You are doing visible work in Africa and same work I'm doing in Nepal. I'm a Humphrey Fellow. So my question is that very shortly, how you have built the trust between the farmers groups and the private sector, especially I'm talking about the buyer, because we are losing the trust after the end of the project. So I'm facing the trouble, so I can find some solution from you, I hope.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, unfortunately, okay, so sorry, also, my my screen video is here, and you guys are all here, so I'm looking here. So essentially, a lot of the trust building started with our work a decade ago. And so all of our field staff are essentially based in the communities that we're working with. And so there's a deep level of trust between our staff and those communities. The way that we started building trust with people like market actors was to have the market actors come and also spend extensive amount of times in the communities as well. So actually with AIF, we convinced them to send a couple of their staff to Malawi to meet our cooperative leaders, understand kind of where they're producing, what their other constraints are, to make sure there was a level of comfort there. And we're at year 3 now, and still we're too involved for my liking. You know, I want to keep pushing on how do we step away from this and make sure that the market does see value in interacting and confidence in interacting directly with those producer groups. And I think that we'll eventually get there, but I think all that I'm saying is that it does take time and persistence and a lot of pressure, I think, from people like us who have the ability to put that pressure on because of the position that we're in as a nonprofit, as the Clinton Foundation, to what more can you do, as you see on my slide, my end of the slideshow, but what more can you be doing? You know, can you be investing more in this supply chain and other types of questions that we're constantly asking our market partners to answer and consider.
Okay, next question is from Mohsin Khan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ariana. It was a wonderful seminar, and I had a chance to read out your all seminar last night, and I found it very much interesting. And more or less, the things and the activities which you mentioned you were doing in Senegal and Malawi are same, and the context of agriculture-related problems in these African countries and Pakistan is same. I come from Pakistan. So I would like to hear about more these things maybe in future from you. So basically right now what I want to ask from you, did you ever experience the issues related to the rights of small farmers or sharecroppers in regards of even distribution of local resources, water and land maybe? Because you mentioned that you all the time worked with the small farmers. So this is a big challenge in Pakistan, that there are mighty landlords who have hijacked all the land resources, and there are small farmers who are very much vulnerable. So if you have gone through with this experience, please put some knowledge on this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ariana?
Yeah, I'll quickly. So it's not too much actually. We're seeing land rights issues a little bit across some of the communities that we're working with, but not unilaterally. One of the biggest that we're seeing is ownership of land, especially as it relates to the ability to build cooperative warehouses. So basically, you know, the banks don't want to lend to the farmers to build the infrastructure of a warehouse without them having the lease to that land. And they don't have that lease. Often the land is rented or it's owned by multiple people. And so there's a lot of challenges around there. So I think keeping an eye on that and trying to solve for, you know, what is the issue? Is it access to land to produce on or access to land to build on? And then trying to work with the partners to figure out how do we solve that problem. I know there's a lot of nonprofits that are focused on land rights, but fortunately for us, it hasn't been too much of a barrier to us doing our work to date.
I saw Patrick Mbaye, you had your hand up.
Yes, I'm particularly impressed with the indigenous nature of your engagements and how you've been able to sort of mobilize domestic ownership for most of your projects. But I have a concern in terms of sustainability. I know in theory, most times we tend to align our projects to sustainability, but what concrete policies do you have in place? And what concrete other practices do you have in place so that when you leave, the local ownership is sustained in a way that makes it to have multiplier effects in terms of their finances?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that we were doing there is the cooperative registration. We saw in Malawi that this was a big issue for informal farmer marketing groups. And basically it enabled us to leave something behind. So working with the Ministry of Trade, which is obviously a government organization, and a couple other partners on training on what it means to be a part of a cooperative is really critically important in terms of what we leave behind. The other thing that we're working on now is as I mentioned, we've kind of revamped the work in 2017, is what can we do in the next couple of years to make sure that there's more that we're leaving behind. So as we have more cooperatives being registered, what else can we do? Which is why I talked about that certification process or some sort of a validation or audit that we can engage in with our community partners that is recognizable by others outside of just the communities or the nonprofit space. So the certification is something that we've talked to with a lot of our market partners, a lot of our financial partners as well. Would they recognize something like this? Would it add value for them to engage with that group without us? And so it's constantly front of mind, but I'd push it back to all of you in terms of what would you say is something that we should be focused on in this space? Like, what do you think we should be leaving behind? Because we don't intend to be with any community permanently. And so as we're moving out, what does success look like, I guess? You don't have to do that, but
that's a wonderful, actually, I wanted to ask you, because some students might be leaving soon,
yeah.
But I wanted to ask you what challenge or a question you have for these students. Since you walked through Cornell, you went through the shoes and you're now on the other side of this world, what advice for young professionals or questions or challenges?
Sure. I think for me is basically how do we break down barriers? How do we not, I don't want to accept business as usual. I think I've mentioned a couple of different systems and interactions that exist in the space that I work in that have been the same and unchanged for decades. You saw that the yield graph and a lot of these frustrations or frictions between banks and farmers. It's been like that for 50 years, 60 years. You know, why has it not changed? How do we help push the envelope, push sectors, push different actors to help solve these challenges? And I think the key thing is recognizing that, you know, we are focused intently on the farmers first, the communities first, but also not excluding, recognizing how important some of the challenges that the markets face and the financial sectors face, and how do we use our resources to de-risk those interactions is so critically important. And so I would, again, basically, you know, throw back to all of you to keep pushing the envelope, keep asking questions, you know, about, you know, is there a way that we can rethink this? And I'm a big fan of not reinventing the wheel and taking stock of what has worked, because so much has worked, but recognizing that there are gaps in a lot of this, and we can't be tackling challenges in isolation. We know that kind of every challenge that we see is linked up with hundreds of other challenges. And so how do we come together, pool our financial resources, our human capital, our experiences to tackle all of that together as nonprofits, governments, private sector, community group, et cetera, et cetera.
Ariana, thank you so very much. There's still a few more questions, but I think we're up on our time. I should also let you all know that Ariana is very active on social media. There's many more platforms for people to engage with you and ask you questions. Yeah. But before we let you off, I just wanted, if you can unmute yourself and give all a round of Cornell applause to Ariana and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you all for listening. I know it's a lot to hear someone talk for 40 minutes straight, so I appreciate you all being here.
Thank you, Ariana. Thank you so very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
And Uganda.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ariana.